Come on. What did you expect?
There's some amazing things on the horizon for the MCU, but clearly the most exciting prospect is an army of Owen Wilsons.
No, I'm taking you someplace to talk.
That's right, I was already super excited for Loki for obvious reasons, but now you're telling me that it might give us a bunch of Owen Wilsons running around saying wow to each other?
Wow.
Move aside, portal scene from Endgame. That would be the best MCU moment ever. But what do I actually mean by that? Well, it has to do with the character Owen Wilson looks set to play in the upcoming Loki TV show. The trailer might make it seem like he's a mild-mannered bureaucrat who just wants to handle your taxes for tax season, but there's so much more to this character than meets the eye. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce you to Mr. Mobius M. Mobius. Let's get started. Loki has a long history of tampering and muddling in certain affairs that he probably shouldn't, but that's about to be taken to a whole new level when his show premieres on Disney+.
Glorious.
Sure, he's been manipulative in the past, but never on the scale of affecting an entire timeline before. But because of the events in Endgame, Loki used the Tesseract to escape the Avengers' clutches and disappear on his own, creating what seems to be a new tangent universe. And I just want to say, any problems he creates isn't really his fault. I blame the Hulk for being super angry about having to take the stairs. And I also blame those cardboard cutout guards Loki had around him in that Endgame scene. Seriously guys, you didn't notice the most dangerous weapon on Earth that glows a bright blue slide right in front of Loki? No one bothered to restrain or move him during this time? Loki's escape was practically handed to him on a silver platter. Of course he was going to take it. But hey, I can't be too mad, I guess, because it's giving us the best thing I could ever ask for. Owen Wilson in an MCU project. Okay, fine. The fact that the TVA, which stands for the Time Variance Authority, will be front and center for the show is exciting too. But what can I say? I'm just a big Owen Wilson fan, and the character he's set to play sounds like a fascinating one. Okay, picture this. Think of a super secret, super important group of timeline heroes who basically jump around and protect the timeline against major threats that could possibly destroy life as we know it. Pretty cool, right? But now imagine that mostly everyone who works in the TVA is just a pencil-pushing bureaucrat. Sure, they have some awesome agents in the field, but ultimately the TVA is run by these nerds in suits who keep everything in line. And honestly, that's actually probably for the best. Time travel is tricky. There's a lot of rules that have to be followed and protocols that need to be maintained in order to keep the time-space continuum from collapsing on itself. So even though a lot of them may not have ever sat at the cool kids table in high school, they're the ones who are most capable of keeping everything in line, which brings us to the actual employees of the TVA, mainly Mr. Mobius M. Mobius. You see, the way the TVA is structured in the comics, the lowest of the low employees are just faceless husks. They'll handle a lot of the grunt work. Copier out of ink? Need a coffee run? That's what they're there for. But above them, in middle management, are the more humanoid people. But the catch is that everyone on that level looks like the same human. They're all clones of the same person, which is why I've been saying there's going to be an army of Owen Wilsons running around. Not all Owen Wilsons are created equally though. Some can get promoted. Owen Wilson is credited as Mobius M. Mobius, who is one of the clones in the comics who was promoted to senior management. Man, can you imagine losing out on a promotion to a person who looks exactly like you? How embarrassing. And if you look at Mobius M. Mobius' comic history, you know his job is to basically keep everything in line and running smoothly.
I don't know, it's hard to say.
He'll probably be Loki's point of contact in the TVA, and Mobius will send him out on his missions. And where did this character come from in the comics? Well, originally, Mobius M. Mobius was based on a famed comic book writer named Mark Grunwald. And if you look at side-by-side comparisons to his character, you can totally see that's true. Both of them just rock that mustachioed look. Nothing says, I'm here to protect the timeline, but also handle the payroll taxes like that sweet, sweet stash. That stash just screams upper middle management, doesn't it? Anyways, besides just having an awesome look that was easy to replicate in comic form, Grunwald was also a pretty talented writer. His influence on Marvel Comics in the 80s and 90s was massive, and he had a legendary run on the Captain America comics for 10 years, starting in 1985 all the way through 1995, introducing a plethora of famed story arcs and new characters. The dude definitely deserved to have a comic character molded after him, and it's nice to see now, almost 25 years after Grunwald's death, that the character of Mobius M. Mobius is getting a new resurgence of popularity. But Grunwald isn't the only comic writer the character of Moby is based on. Some versions of the character are actually based on Marvel writer Tom DeFalco, and his claim to fame is his white hair and beard. Man, if I was a comic writer, I would think it's the highest honor to have a comic character molded after you, don't you think?
What did you expect?
Well, sure, a boatload of money might be equally as nice, but at least the comic character will live on forever. So that's why I really like Owen Wilson's look in the new Loki show, because it looks like it's blending elements of both Grunwald and DeFalco. Wilson's Mobius is rocking the stash, as we've already established, but he's also keeping that white hair element, and I think that makes for a fun combination, don't you? So now that we've talked enough about Mobius M. Mobius, man, I just never get tired of saying his name like that.
Wow, you're so dominant.
And the character's comic backstory, both on and off the page, it's time to discuss what exactly his role is going to be in the show going forward.
Wow.
I already mentioned he's probably going to be giving Loki his missions and be his point of contact. But the question is, will Mobius ultimately be friend or foe to Loki? And that's tough to answer.
I am a god, you dull creature.
Loki is technically still a bad guy at this point in the timeline, so any foe to Loki would really just be a good guy, right? Or are we going to be in a situation where Loki, away from the Tesseract and his staff's corruptive influence, turns good a little sooner and realizes there are some shifty and shady things going on in the TVA that needs to be stopped? And remember, Mobius is just middle management. He's not the head honcho. Usually in the comics, one of the top members of the TVA is Mr. Alternity, and judging from the trailer, this might be a gender-swapped Gugu Mbatha-Raw playing the part. Could she be the ultimate big bad and Mobius and Loki team up to stop her? It's also fun to mention that one of Mobius's subordinates is called Mr. Tesseract. Do you think there's a way to work him into the Loki show in some way? That might be fun for Loki to meet someone with the same name as the object that has shaped Loki's whole adult life, wouldn't it?
You have heart.
And overall, I'm hoping this isn't just a one-and-done appearance by Mobius. I think he's an interesting character played by a really fun actor. And since the MCU is all about connectivity at this point, and given that there will undoubtedly be some more timeline shenanigans because of the multiverse concept, it would make sense to have a familiar character show up in a few spots to explain everything. Mobius could be the next Nick Fury in a sense, assembling his own team of timeline warriors to protect the universe. Come on, doesn't that sound awesome? And if it means more Owen Wilson in the MCU, I'll take it. Do you know Owen Wilson has said the word wow over 100 times so far in his movies? We just don't deserve this man, people. Let's take bets. How many wows will Owen Wilson say in Loki? Whoever guesses it the closest will receive the truly honored title of Biggest Owen Wilson Wow Guesser.